Picture this. Suspended in this black void are three objects. Three instruments designed by the German military to punish its own soldiers. The first is a rusted 20-kilogram iron ankle weight from the Prussian Army, 1700s. It represents the primitive era of flesh, where military punishment was an agonizing orthopedic battle against gravity itself. The second is a rusted Tellermine 35 and a red inverted triangle patch from 1943. It represents the industrial era, where military criminals were mathematically expended as human mine clearers. And the third is a glowing digital smart dossier dated 2026. It represents the modern era. The weapon is no longer iron or high explosives. It is the absolute silent erasure of a soldier's identity. Three objects, three eras of crime and punishment. But before we can examine the freezing, suicidal nightmare of the World War II penal battalions, we must first look at the static orthopedic trauma of the 18th century. Because to understand how Germany turned its criminals into disposable human shields, you must first understand how they used gravity to break their bones. If you appreciate the cold, forensic truth of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing. And please, comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I read the autopsy logs with you, connected across time and space. Act 1. The Era of Flesh. The year is 1700, the Kingdom of Prussia. If a soldier commits theft or insubordination, he is not sent to a prison cell. A cell costs the state money. The state prefers a punishment that requires zero maintenance and relies entirely on the laws of physics. They used the Holzpferd, the wooden horse. Forget the blood and the whip. The horror of the wooden horse was a masterpiece of static pain. The condemned man is forced to sit astride a wooden beam that has been sharpened into an inverted V. To accelerate the biological failure, 20-kilogram iron weights are chained to his ankles. The geometry is devastating. The entire weight of the human body, plus the iron, is concentrated on a surface area of less than 2 inches. As gravity pulls the man downward, the sharp wooden edge acts as a crude tourniquet. It severely compresses the femoral artery. The lower extremities are immediately starved of oxygen, a condition known as acute ischemia. Instinctively, the soldier uses his thigh muscles to try and lift himself off the edge. But within minutes, lactic acid builds up. His muscles begin to spasm violently. Eventually, the muscles give out. The full dead weight of the body crashes back down onto the beam. Over hours, this sheer downward force begins to cause microfractures deep within the pelvic bone. There is no tearing of the skin, no blood, just the silent, agonizing failure of the human skeletal system under the crushing weight of its own gravity. Gravity was a cheap and effective torturer for the 18th century. But in the 20th century, the state needed more than just broken bones. It needed biomass to absorb high-explosive shrapnel. The era of the wooden horse was over. The era of the human mine detector had arrived.
Act 2. The Era of Industry. 1943. The Eastern Front. The Third Reich is bleeding out in the snows of Russia. Manpower is no longer a surplus. It is a critical, depleting resource. If a soldier sleeps on watch, disobeys an order, or attempts to desert, the military can no longer afford to tie him to a wooden horse. A crippled man cannot absorb a Soviet bullet. Punishment evolves from orthopedic correction to tactical consumption. The condemned soldier is stripped of his rank. His medals are confiscated. The National Eagle insignia is ripped from his uniform. In its place, a red inverted triangle is sewn onto his sleeve. He is no longer a soldier of the Reich. He has been transferred to the Strafbataillon, the Penal Battalion. German infantrymen darkly referred to these units as the Himmelfahrtskommando, the Ascension Command, a one-way ticket to heaven. They were intentionally equipped with obsolete captured weapons and deprived of winter clothing. They were not given enough ammunition to fight a sustained battle, because the High Command did not expect them to shoot. They expected them to clear the path. To understand the clinical horror of the Penal Battalion, you must understand the geometry of the Soviet minefield and the mechanics of the German S-mine, often deployed by both sides in various forms. The S-mine, or Bouncing Betty, is an anti-personnel weapon designed to maximize kinetic energy transfer into the human body. When 3 pounds of pressure are applied to the sensor prongs, a primary propellant charge is ignited. The mine does not detonate in the dirt. It launches itself upward exactly 3 feet into the air. Waist height, the exact biological center of mass. At 3 feet, the main charge detonates. 360 steel balls are fired outward at supersonic speeds. If elite regular infantry walked into this, the unit's combat effectiveness would drop to 0. So commanders employed a brutal tactical solution: biological mine clearance. The Penal Battalion is ordered to march in a straight line, shoulder to shoulder, directly into the suspected minefield. Behind them, at a safe distance, march the elite combat troops. When a penal soldier steps on the trigger, the mine bounces and detonates. His body literally acts as a biological blast shield, absorbing the supersonic steel, so the elite troops behind him remain untouched. But what if the penal soldier refuses to walk into the minefield? What if the biological instinct for survival overrides the order? The architects of the Strafbataillon engineered an inescapable spatial trap. If the penal soldier looks forward, he faces Soviet artillery and hidden explosives. But if he looks backward, exactly 100 yards behind his trench sits the Feldgendarmerie, the German military police. They are armed with heavy machine guns, and their barrels are not pointed at the Soviets. They are pointed directly at the backs of the Penal Battalion. They are the blocking detachment. Retreat is classified as desertion under fire. Execution is instant and mathematical. The men of the Strafbataillon were told that if they fought bravely, if they survived their sentence, their honor would be restored and they could return to their regular units. It was a calculated lie. The missions assigned to the Penal Battalions, storming fortified bunkers without artillery support, or clearing minefields by foot, were engineered for a 95% casualty rate. Punishment in the industrial era was no longer about correcting a soldier's behavior. It was about consuming his biomass to buy the state another day of survival. In 1945, the Third Reich collapsed, and the meat grinder of the Penal Battalions was shut down forever. The modern German military swore never again to treat its soldiers as disposable flesh, but they didn't stop punishing them. They just digitized the execution.
Act 3. The Era of Silicon. The year is 2026. The Bundeswehr. Following the catastrophic human cost of the Second World War, the modern German military was rebuilt on the principles of absolute democracy and human rights. The wooden horse is a museum relic. The Penal Battalion is a war crime. The German constitution strictly forbids any form of physical or psychological abuse. If a modern soldier commits a severe crime, treason, extremism, or massive insubordination, there is no courtyard. There is no firing squad. The military does not touch your body. They touch your data. This is the era of zero-touch excommunication. The punishment is executed entirely through the bureaucracy. We call it a digital autopsy. Within seconds of a guilty verdict, the soldier's security clearance is permanently revoked.
Their biometric data is blacklisted from all federal facilities. They are systematically ghosted by the state they swore to protect. But the true forensic trauma of the 21st century is not the loss of a job. It is financial death. In the military, the maximum penalty is the Unanhafte Entlassung, the dishonorable discharge. When this digital guillotine falls, it strips away the soldier's rank. It instantly vaporizes decades of earned military pension. It severs their state-sponsored health care. The invisible shockwave of this discharge follows them into civilian life. In modern society, a dishonorable discharge is a permanent digital scarlet letter. Background checks will flag them. Mortgages will be denied. Employment in the government or corporate sector becomes mathematically impossible. The modern military engineered a way to inflict lifelong psychological and financial ruin without spilling a single blood. Look at the forensic timeline of military discipline. In the 18th century, they said, "You broke the law. We will use gravity to break your bones." In 1943, they said, "You broke the law. We will expend your kinetic energy." In 2026, they say, "You broke the law. We will delete your existence." Part 4. The verdict. We have evolved from the orthopedic crushing of the iron weight to the sterile efficiency of the algorithm. But the fundamental architecture of punishment remains the same: absolute control. Now, I have a survival question for you. If you committed a crime in uniform, would you prefer the honest agony of the 18th century wooden horse, where the pain is absolute, but if you survive the skeletal trauma, your sins are forgiven and you remain in the ranks? Or would you choose the sterile execution of the modern era, where you keep your body, you keep your life, but your identity and your financial future are permanently erased? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. And if you think the open battlefield is the ultimate test of human survival, wait until you see what happens when the biology of the human body is sealed inside a steel tube 300 feet underwater. For the forensic analysis of The Iron Coffin, the biology of the U-boat nightmare, click right here. I'll see you in the lab.